Hello, hello. Thank you everybody for being here today. Today we get to speak with Steve Russell, author of the incredibly uplifting,
Mm.
inspiring story, Burden. And if you didn't catch everyone else's reaction, that is the opposite of what the story is. The story is bleak, the story is barren, desolate, it's full of reluctance and regret. There's a lot going on here, and I loved it. It's one of those where you put it down and you're just like, you need to process for a little bit. It's a book that makes you feel. So I highly I can't speak enough praise on it. Real good stuff.
Thank you, man.
You have to say hats off, which is
Ha-
ironic because Ryan's the only one who's not wearing a hat. Hats
Yeah.
off.
Hats off. Hats off.
Thank you.
I also thoroughly enjoyed Birdman. Man. It was odd coming into it, coming off of Steam,
Mm.
and thinking like, I know what Steve Russell writes. I like Steve Russell's writing, and then reading Burden before I get into anything. This is what I was going to say, and I said I'll save it for the interview. My theory the whole way through it was there was no collapse. This is just regular modern day England. The
Yeah, I
story
mean,
takes place.
yeah, as a twist, if I was going for a Shyamalan-esque twist, I think that would work pretty well, honestly, the way it sort of plays out. And, for everyone who's watching this, who's interested in Burden and learning a bit more about it, thank you, obviously, for taking the time to watch the interview. I really appreciate it. And, I've been so excited to talk with you guys about this for a while.
Yeah.
Burden's been out for a little bit, but, it's had a little bit of a spike in interest because of its incorporation to YPQ. So, as I said,
Absolutely.
I expounded so much online, but thank you both for having it, for featuring it, and it's a bittersweet thing to be part of the end, but an
Yeah,
honor nonetheless to be a part and included with that. So thank you both.
Appreciate it. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
the honor's
Uh,
ours, man.
Burden, yeah, it's not a cheery tale. It's not the sort of thing that you like. And now to escape for an hour and feel good about life.
But
It's a challenging story.
but I think with it, there's a sense, and like for me, what makes these types of dystopian and post-apocalyptic stories so heavy hitting is the realness of it. Like the reality of for let's just take the story title, Burden. That was very reflective within the story of Owen and AJ didn't have kids of their own. And although the kids in everyday life aren't a burden, in this environment, they 100% are. And you're in a world of survival where you can barely look out for yourself, and now you have to look out for someone else. And given the circumstances, I had a book club meeting about this last week, and we talked about it, where one of the members was saying, Owen was too harsh with the kids. But the other member in the book club, who's a mother, was like, "Oh no, they would have gone off the rails so much sooner than that."
That's amazing. Firstly, that was part of the book club.
Of
So,
course,
for everyone
every
who
book.
partook in that, man, that's amazing. That's awesome that people read it and wanted to discuss it like that.
Mm.
Dude, that's crazy to me. That's amazing. Thank you so much. And I keep
Of
saying
course.
amazing. It is. But like, yeah, writing this stuff, I've said in previous interviews, it was probably the hardest book to write. Like, I don't shy away from the influences that I took going into this, things like The Road, The Last of Us, they're all pretty pertinent. They're all very much there, but I wanted to put it through this filter of how I would view something like this going down and rooting it in England specifically, because, we have the American story. We've seen that a lot. And, one big thing, and this is going to sound like a weird sort of jumping off point because it's
Mm.
included within Burden, is the lack of purely defensive weaponry. Right? We don't have, like,
Mhm.
I'm accent I know based in the UK, but like I've grew up here pretty much. And like, what does that story of survival now look like when things have to get even grittier because you have to get that much closer, you know? And again, weapons are involved and guns are a part of it. But like Owen, for example, he's a lousy shot, right? He doesn't know how to
Mhm.
use it. He's really upfront about that because it's not part of the fabric of the UK over here,
Mhm.
unless I guess you're in the country. Hot Fuzz taught me everyone's packing in the country, but insofar as his personal usage, he doesn't know, which is why they have things like the cricket bat, and
Yeah.
things that are a lot more personal, I say personal, but like it's an incredibly daunting and harrowing thing, one must imagine, because I don't have any personal experience, to get close enough to bludgeon someone to death because you have to in order to survive or
Yeah,
protect family.
that's the thing with like guns, you're a bit removed. You just have to pull a trigger and you can do it from a distance. Whereas if you're using a screwdriver or a hammer or
Mhm.
this or that, you're getting up close and personal. And there's a level of this can sound messed up, but like there's a level of intimacy there. Like there's a level of like intensity there that you have to feel, I imagine.
Absolutely. And that's why I didn't want to shy away from that in the writing. Like, I wanted to try and make it as visceral as possible, but not for like, this wasn't Saw in nature, the movie Saw. This wasn't
Mm,
like doing it for grotesque, the point of being grotesque. It wasn't that. It was, this is the reality of what it would be. This would, the just the sheer harrowing nature of it, what it does to a person, how it can scrape a person's soul, how it affects you deeply. And, blurring the line, I saw a review of it recently on Goodreads where this woman said, like, the story really questions what it is to be good, what it is to be a good person. What does that look like in the society? I was like, fuck, yes, this is exactly what I want to ask. These are the big questions. What is morality in a world that lacks it? And
mm,
and what does that look like? And especially with how far people are forced to go. You have things like the community, you have the procession, obviously, you have these coalitions, these people forming together, the sense of community that so many people will want. But then Owen's such a survivalist by himself. And how does that look after 8 years of raising kids, no less, and within that background and with that backdrop, what does it do to them? Because the level of and state of paranoia that would just innately indoctrinate into the kids, which is why, like, I loved writing Finn, because
yeah.
Finn
Mhm.
throughout was, regardless of the situation, environment, the nature nurture of it, there's an optimistic flair to Finn that I really wanted to cling to. Right, he's somewhat childish in comparison to his younger sister. These were all by design. um because he has that sort of reflection of, he was like 2 when the collapse happened. So, like, hardly any memories what he has, he probably makes up, which I touch on very briefly. But like Kyra, she is a collapse kid, full from
She never
being
knew
very
it.
young to where they are now. That's all she knows. And I think that it's really affected her as a person, has shaped her personality in comparison and contrast to her brother.
Yeah, Kyra's a little psycho, man.
Yeah.
Busy psycho. I loved her. I thought she was great. Whereas Finn, I made notes early on. I was like, if Finn gets like caught in a bear trap, I'd be leaving his ass behind. This little boy, man, every time he messed up, and of course, like I know you and I are both dads. If your son was doing something like that, you'd be like, "Come on, Matt, like I'll make allowances." But because I was reading it, he's much older. I was like, "Your ass is getting left
Yeah.
in the garden center, bro."
Well, I mean, you two, I'm not, but like Steve, oh gosh, I have to separate like which Steve I'm talking to here. But like the Steve here is
I don't know
a,
where you're pointing.
oh,
I
you're on,
also have
oh,
no
okay,
reference.
okay, okay. So the Steve with,
Say the one that's wearing a hat.
yeah, well,
Maybe that'll help.
the,
Or
the,
glasses.
the Steve that looks like Eric Cartman, um,
That could be either of them.
like you're a recent father, and obviously,
Mhm.
you have a child as well, and I imagine writing this as a parent was a very
Mhm.
difficult experience. And then on the flip side, Steve reading this as a new parent was probably different as well. Like I thought it
Well,
was hard.
the idea of morality that I'm going to call other Steve Russell, and I'll be Hannah. How
That
about
works.
that?
That works. That was a lot smarter.
The
Yeah.
idea that's a nice authorly thing to do.
Yeah.
The thing that Steve Russell was talking about morality in the post collapse. What does morality mean when your kids are hungry? Like I've had my son be hungry in the middle of the night and cry for food, and I'm like, if anyone tried to stop me feeding him, I'd kill them. Like, straight up. But that's just what happens when you're a parent. It was really cool to read that. Also through the lens of it not being your kids.
Yes.
And to add to
This
that,
is super important.
yes, because that's the I think I liked what Ryan said at the start about that burden, but I also read it as a double entendre where Owen feels like the burden
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
because
Sir.
he's mega depressed. And he's a burden on AJ, who was the best character, by the way. AJ is an angel, and we're going to have serious words after the spoiler.
I was gonna say I
I
yeah, how yeah. Okay, go on.
I texted Ryan. I was like, "Bro, I'm gonna fucking kill. I would kill this guy." What we doing? But it was really there was loads of burden-esque things happening, which I thought was
Mm,
interesting. Like it was a well-chosen title. Did the title come
thank
early
you.
on in the process, or was that when you went back you realized how good a title it would be?
To be honest with you, Burden was the first choice. There was no other
Nice,
trip
nice.
because it started to tie in exactly what you're saying so heavily and
Yep.
thematically across every aspect, right? Because
Hmm.
like there's a burden, pushing that concept out a little bit, like the burden of responsibility. Who has that? Well, the groom and the brides, they
Yeah,
have a
even for
burden
the
of responsibility of
antagonist.
their
Yeah.
own upon their own civilization, their own society, and like there's the concept of burden, what that looks like through a parental lens, through a friendship lens, through a relationship lens. And as you
Hmm.
rightly pointed out, like there was this massive play on Owen feeling like a burden to everybody around him. And like, there's spoiler, I hope you've read it, but like later on, like he goes to some really dark personal places where
Hmm.
the burden feels like, oh, they would be better off without me. Like
Yeah.
I'm the one holding them back, and this is a really tough thing because this is something I think a lot of men do go through. And it was on my mind. I wanted to treat it delicately because it is an important thing. And unfortunately, where a lot of people do feel that way, some unfortunate decisions can come off the back of that. And I really wanted to explore that with a deft touch, whilst also being as real with it as needed for the story, right? I said this one time, everything to serve the story. And in this case, it's true here. If I shied away from it, in my opinion, it disrespects the internal issues that the person is going through. And I didn't want to hide from that. So it became an intrinsic part about how he eventually carried himself, how he was within the family dynamic, how he was with AJ and everything and everyone around him. But from top to bottom, the theme burden and the theme of being a burden, the theme of things being a burden, it was so prevalent that like, yeah, I'll be honest with you, I don't think I ever had a working title. I think because this idea came almost fully formed. The way I write, I'm not a pantser. I like to plot. And when I was going through my notebooks and stuff, and like from day one, I'm pretty sure it was just burden, underlined, capital letters, underlined, here we go. And by the end of writing it and getting to the process of publishing it, which took a while because you guys mentioned something really interesting. I'm going to touch on it in just a sec. Like the title never changed. If anything, it became just more rooted with this is it. I was worried maybe it's too on the nose, but so thank you. I'm really glad you feel so strongly that it was a good title for the book.
If
Well,
I could
there's
punch
I've
in, literally also there's a major, I think maybe an underlying undercurrent theme in the book is that what you've got, what you own is what you can carry,
yeah.
Mm,
which is a
yeah,
burden and it's literally the backpack that you're wearing and the food that's in it.
that's right. Yeah.
No,
It's just
and I've always been a
great.
big fan, and I compare this to stories like The Road, just from the dystopian element of it and the post-apocalyptic element of it. But like cover art and titles and everything, it goes a long way in foreshadowing what goes on. I think we've all seen that cover of The Road where you have the footsteps ending a little bit sooner. And it's the little details like that that go a long way because yeah, there's a lot going on here, and it's all heavy. So
Mm,
I'm just like glancing off. I have the cover in front of me. But it's all heavy, and you even see on the cover, like, yeah, there's a shack, but it's barren. And
Nothing.
well, you have to also remember this was, and forgive me because it's been a few months. I've read the book itself. Um, this has been, I think, 8 years after society's
okay.
collapsed.
Since the
Um,
class. Yeah, yeah.
so a lot of like the easy pickings, as it were, are gone. Like there would have been, I imagine, that initial kind of scramble.
Mhm.
And then after that initial scramble, like you can't just walk into a grocery store and grab a can of beans. Like those are going to be kind of picked clean at this point.
Yeah, you see that in the newsagent scene at the beginning.
Yeah.
We also have a little sort of throwback to that with the Young Bucks Bakery later on as well. You
Mhm.
know, and explaining the concept of what a bakery was to the kids was fun, and things like podcasts and this disconnect. This is so much more than just a generational disconnect. It's a purely society. How can you explain what was before to somebody that's never experienced it?
Mhm.
But I think one of the big things I want to jump onto now based off of what you guys brought up earlier was
Yeah.
this book took a while to write because it was such a heavy book to do, and I found it so difficult sort of getting in the mindset to do it, and I wrote this before I was a father, and it
Oh,
was
Right.
published after he was born, right?
interesting.
So the rewriting process of it was incredibly interesting because as Steve Hanna was saying, like it does inflect, it does paint, it does shade things certainly differently. Because I was writing it from a perspective like, okay, if this was my nephew and niece, how would we go about this? How intrinsic, how deep is this? Especially because, Owen's sister passes and then that burden of responsibility falls to him because they were looking after him whilst he was going through some personal demons. And so they happened to be the right place, right time, so on and so forth, just to get everyone super caught up really fast.
Mhm.
Because it is noted as well at one point, like the collapse happened, but things didn't fall apart completely. At first, people did help each other out. There was, because with two young kids, like imagine, for example, and one of the big things I really wanted to hit with this is it's not a monster book. It's not a zombie flick. Sorry, a zombie novel or anything like that. It doesn't
Yeah.
have we are the monsters. Like humanity is my it shows it really tears our face away, tears all the masks away, and shows what we're truly capable of for good or ill, to protect those that we care about and what that might look like. But yeah, that process of going back and reading it as a father, especially because again, this has existed in some form or another for a very, very long time. Because sorry guys, I'm a slow writer. I wish I was faster. I'm trying my best. I'm trying to get better. But yeah, so my son was born in 2020. He's just had a birthday, and like this, I started writing this. I was very purposeful with it because I can see in Scrivener when I started writing it, and it was only about 8 or 9 months before he was born. So like we were pregnant with him and whatnot. My partner was pregnant, and I was just like, I need to write this from a different perspective. I can't let the fatherhood aspect of it, because I'm a different person. The second that kid was
Mhm.
born, I was a different person.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, it just happens.
100%.
They say it to you all the time, man. Like all the shows, everything, your friends, your family, like, oh, everything changes at the birth of your kid, and like you will look at things differently. Like whenever I go out now, I'm like the Terminator, but for hazards for my child, right? When he's
Yeah.
scanning the bar, but like just looking for things that he could trip on or knock into, or how's that kid acting, things like that. And that really did paint how I then went back in to revise it. And I was able to try and strengthen the bond without changing the bond because I didn't want to make it I did not want to change his dynamic and his role from that of an uncle who feels like he has to look after them to that of a
Yeah.
parent who wants to look after them, you see.
Well, for
And
me that was like the biggest thing is that you kind of put a twist on it where it's one thing where you have the family unit. I wouldn't want to be left in this like as a like putting myself in the shoes of the children for a second. I wouldn't want to be left in this situation with my parents, let alone with like my aunt and uncle.
Mhm,
Um, and it was interesting to kind of see that little twist because then I think there's a lot more emotion that stands out from it in terms like, is this really my responsibility? Like, do I owe you
Mhm.
this? Do I need like this is where the selfishness gets into play. It's like it's one thing to be selfish in today's day and age where everything's functioning, but in this society where nothing works and you can barely survive yourself,
mhm,
like Steve Hanna said, just leave them.
mhm.
Yeah.
Um,
Leave him in the garden center.
yeah,
Go get some beans. It's fine.
but I think there is an element like that where if you're thinking strictly from the perspective of what is safest for the children, is it safest for the children to be in the community where you can not just have what seems to be a little bit more protection and more consistency, but also stability and a social life? Because there's all of, and
Mhm.
you touch on this a lot, Steve Russell, but there's all of these elements at play when you're raising a child. And what kind of life is that child really having? if
Hmm.
they're just being taught to forage and survive all day. Like how, it's one thing, okay, you're 8, you're 6, whatever. What happens when you're 17 and
Mhm.
15? Like what happens when you get older and life starts to develop? And I think
Hmm.
it's a really interesting kind of moral dilemma as well.
Yeah, I really wanted to play with that. I think, as you say, like that little tweak, that little twist of their family dynamic gives it a completely different flavor. Because we've seen, for example, like reluctant dad figure with like kid
Yeah.
that brings out the heart of gold. Like we've seen Joel and Ellie, we've seen Mandalorian and Grogu. Like we have these tropes now that exist quite prevalently in mainstream media. But like
Hmm.
with the uncle, and especially like for AJ, because she's sort of just a part, she gets dragged along to the whole thing, and everybody feels
Hmm.
committed to everybody because there's this part in the book where AJ is sort of like reflecting on the fact that like for a period of time it looked like she might not want to be with Owen, and
Yeah.
then the collapse
Hmm.
happened, and suddenly it's better the devil you know than than you don't, and
Yeah.
you throw your lot in to try and survive in these unprecedented circumstances, and see how that goes. And I think they sort of went down the trail together and got to a point where they couldn't extricate themselves from each other anymore. It
Hmm.
became all they knew. And with Owen as well, I think it comes to an element of trust. Like nobody's going to do. He's quite arrogant in that way. Like
Yeah.
he feels a responsibility, a burden, but he also feels he can do a better job than anybody, whilst also being fully aware of his own foibles and flaws. And
Mhm.
he's
And
uh,
relying
he's
on AJ
complex.
quite a bit. Like he really depends on her for a
Yeah.
lot of things.
Yeah.
On AJ.
Oh yeah.
Oh
And
yeah, she is the anchor, man.
and
She's the
Yeah,
since
she's the
heartbeat.
foundation.
since we're
She's
like
the
25 minutes into the interview, I'm gonna say spoilers and go, how dare you?
There
What
we
were
go.
you thinking?
There we go. That's what I was waiting
How
for.
dare you? Who do you think you are? Rachel came through the house because she heard me shout, "What the f-" what is it? And I was like, Steve Russell just shot AJ in the head, man, with like 2 pages to go. What are we doing here? I've got to ask one writer to another, one artist to another, why? I feel like
Um,
if I could suggest what I thought it was, because I thought about this a lot. Because an underlying theme of the book is how brutal the world is, and I feel like our little main character families, they kept getting lucky over and over and over again,
Yeah.
and that's got to catch you up eventually. Was that what you were thinking going into it, or what was your thinking behind that choice?
um, I think that's a fair assessment. Like when you're writing a story like this, or when you look at the things that inspired it, or and other stories in general, like plot armor can only go so far,
Yeah.
until it feels inorganic, it feels too
Mhm.
safe. And in that moment near the end, right, you can go two ways with this, I think, as a writer. You can take a swing or you can play it safe. And it depends on your audience, it depends on you as a writer as to what feels more creatively true. And
Mhm.
for me, part this is such a controversial thing that's happened, and I love it because of the conversations that have come from it. But the idea that you're so close to the end, you almost feel safe. you
Yeah, yeah.
feel you feel the exit ramp is coming up and you're almost there, and then you can relax. And of course they're going to get out of this jam. They got out of every other jam. Like they're going to, this is AJ, this is fine. This,
Yeah.
how are they going to get this? Like, I don't know, not to trivialize this a little bit, but it's that Indiana Jones cliffhangeriness of it.
Mhm.
Like how are they going to get out of this? Find out next week. But instead we do it right then and there, and they don't.
Mhm.
And I think the impact of that is something that, as you said, like the reaction is visceral. If you
Yeah.
get to a state as a reader where you think, all right, one more hurdle to get over, and we're scot-free, we're home free, they're going to survive, everybody gets to survive another day, and maybe we get to see more of them. I don't know. Until I pull the rug, I zig
Yeah.
when you think I'm going to zag with that, and
Yeah.
it just felt right. And the big question at the time to me was who gets it, right? Like,
I thought it was going to be one of the kids,
I was
maybe.
gonna say if I thought you were gonna pop Finn. It's
I might have. Oh.
no, I think it's a testament to not just the story, but also like just indie publishing in general. Like the self-publishing in general too, is that to your point, you're kind of lulled into a false sense of security. Everyone's happy at the end, da 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 da. But there's no mold for you to follow.
Hmm.
You can kill the parents at the end. You can do this and that. I've had much heavier endings reading indie stories the last 4 years
Hmm.
than the kind of plot armor that trad books have.
Hmm.
And I think one of the nice things about indie and about self-publishing is that there is no security. You can do whatever you want. You can say whatever you want. I mean, like to an extent, but
Yeah.
like
You can take those bold creative swings
exactly.
and then
And
see where it goes.
I will say having the ending that you chose for this has definitely left a much bigger impact than had everyone gone out scot-free at the end.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think so.
Um,
Definitely.
and you
I
know,
It
think
it's
also
it's
put a
a
kind of, and you go
sorry.
right.
I was gonna say it's just a bold creative choice because like once that's written down, you can't go back on it.
I mean, thematically as well, I got a copy here. Let me just have a look at it because we tie back into the themes. And one of the
Hmm.
things that he was going on and on and on about, throughout to really hammer home was the idea that like no matter what, as long as like he's been teaching them everything they need to survive, right? And I'm going to leave the ending up into interpretation for
Mhm.
now
Yeah,
because things, it's not looking great for Owen. And they
Yeah.
come gently to a rest outside of an appropriately named pub, which is the Rested Hangman. And the last line of the book is they had survived. And, if we're thinking about this from a purely thematic point, like who's the they? Because they as a unit haven't survived, you know?
Hmm.
So one interpretation, I'm not saying this is the interpretation, but one interpretation could be for Owen, it is almost a bittersweet, painful, but happy-ish ending because the kids have survived and they have
Hmm.
all the tools they need from a lifetime of training to carry on, hopefully
Well,
surviving.
and I think we're also missing for me one of the biggest parts and the whole premise of the story, in my humble opinion, is that he got to eat the chocolate bar at the end.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
he got his water rush.
regardless of the direction the story takes, in my eyes, his arc is finished. He got the chocolate bar. There's nothing more
Yeah.
for Owen. Um,
That's
but no,
it.
I
That
I
that
think
thing went
it's
a long way with them. That went on a
yeah.
there's like the one ring, but with a candy bar for them.
But to your point, it is like an important thing to kind of see in terms of, it brings you back to the whole thing of like your literature teacher telling you, oh, the curtains are blue because of the depression in here and there. And it's like, no, they're just blue because that's the color I saw when I saw curtains. But there are elements to that. There are layers to this, and it's nice to be able
Mm.
it's nice to hear that they were considered. Like they had survived. What does that mean? And
Mhm.
it leaves on that kind of note that makes it more impactful and that leaves you lingering with it.
I think it's almost like a litmus test of sorts for the reader. You've got through such a challenging story. What does that last line, what does that scenario mean to you? How do you interpret that? And what does that mean about you as a person? You know? Um, because for me, like, or is this a half full or a half empty thing? I don't want to say because I don't want to,
Hmm.
shade anybody's thoughts on it, but and influence it because part of the fun is how do you react to this? And like if there
Yeah.
are future stories set with these characters, if, where are they now and what does that look like? Especially considering what they've lost and gone through,
Yeah.
you know?
We've spoke so much about like what was deliberate about the story, and for what it's worth, when I read they had survived at the end, my interpretation was that he was talking about the kids, not himself.
Yeah,
Uh,
he was in a
like
bad
from
way
his
when it
perspective,
ended.
they survived, and I thought that was an interesting note to end on. But here's a question about something that I definitely don't think you did deliberately, but I'm curious about where it came from. Did you mean for the antagonists to be an international mix of immigrants in a post-Brexit Britain?
Wow.
Did I mean
Steve, we've
Got a
to?
got
Spanish
five
guy and two
minutes left. Why
Germans.
would you do this?
I just
So
tossed that grenade into the ether.
yeah, actually it's funny you mentioned that. It was an intentional choice. I wanted to
Interesting.
have I wanted to have this sort of representation of what England could look like and what happened, and the fact that you have a Spaniard in charge of the procession, I think is very
Yeah, yeah,
interesting, coupled with his German English twin wives, and they work
That's
so
good.
well as their thrupleness, as I believe the term is now. Um, but it was an interesting choice. It gives it an interesting dynamic, and I think it was and like as well, for example, like the principal, she's Asian, and things
yeah,
like that,
yep.
because this is the world we live in, and
Yeah.
in those sort of positions, you go to the people that are able to fill the void, fill the vacuum regardless.
Mhm.
Right? Like if you're in a dire strait and you've lost everything and the collapse is happening and people are turning on you and you're not sure who to trust, and finally you meet this charismatic Spaniard,
Yep.
and he's got two wives, or should I say they each have a husband, and suddenly it creates this interesting dynamic of who are they? They have a cult of personality, I think, that
Mhm.
is very attractive to a lot of people because they promise them survival and they deliver, but just like with Owen, at what cost to them?
Mhm.
I
But
quite
it's a
liked how
really interesting question, though. Super interesting question.
I quite liked how I don't want to say inept, but how kind of broadly bad at being very evil villains the bad guys were. Like they do their job, they're good, they're tracking them. The Russian guy, I can't remember his name, but the Russian guy was great.
Mhm.
Again, another international guy.
Mm.
But I quite liked the when it actually came down to like the nitty gritty of tracking like two kids and a couple of what 20 somethings through the forest and stuff. They were getting their ass torn up, man. They were
Mhm.
not having a good time, and they were
No.
just as frightened as everyone else was. Like they were mad as hell the whole time. They were
Yeah,
having a
and
really bad time.
And I
before we
think
get
I
into
think
spoilers,
that's sorry, I
sorry.
was just gonna say I think that's the other thing is like, yeah, you have the community, yeah, you have the procession, and like this is just gonna be the region, but there's always gonna be a bigger fish out there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like there's
But
someone's always afraid of something.
yes, absolutely, and especially in a sort of society like that. And again, we're dealing with spoilers now, but like when
Yeah.
they are in the forest and one of the brides just gets it,
Yep.
right? In the same way as AJ gets it later. And
Yeah.
we really start knuckling into like eye for an eye stuff.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And all these themes, they're all prevalent, they're all there, but they're all meant to be challenging again in the sense of like, well, does that make it right? Does
Yeah.
that
Yeah. That's what
justify
I
it?
liked about it.
Yeah.
Because I felt great satisfaction when the bride got shot up in the forest. Did she get shot or did AJ beat her to death? I can't remember. I think she gets shot in
Mhm.
the forest, and I was like, yes. And I was like, oh, hold on. Because I
Yeah,
think it cuts to her sister just breaking down. And
Yeah.
because
I
you
was like,
go
oh,
from
damn,
sort
man.
of
Yeah, they're people. Like,
So I hate saying this. We have a minute and 15 seconds left.
that's a
So
Zoom by, man. No pun
yeah,
intended. We're on
pun
Zoom, but yeah.
intended. That was well done. Uh, so obviously we've had you on before. Other stories you have out, people like Burden, what more should they read? What should they look out for? We're gonna put the link to your website and social media in the little comment box or description. So have
Thank
at
you.
it.
So
Yeah.
I would say absolutely check out Steen. It's probably one of the closer one thematically, in a lot of ways to Burden. It does have a supernatural detective, so it's not as heavy, or although it is gritty. And I also have a superhero series called The Ultraverse. The sequel to that is coming out this summer.
Nice.
So do check it out. You can get free stories, including a free Steen short story and a free Ultraverse short story by signing up for my newsletter. You can do that. All the links are going to be somewhere, like Ryan
Yeah,
said.
they'll
Thank you. I
all be
appreciate it.
somewhere. Well,
No,
wonderful. Well, thanks again. I know it was kind of a pain to schedule this, but appreciate all the flexibility all around the world. And if you've made it this far into the interview, it was burdened by Steve Russell. And just thanks again, guys. Always a blast.
all the blast, guys. Godspeed. Also,